I woke to the sound of someone screaming. "My lord!" The voice echoed through a luxurious bedroom, far larger than anything I had ever seen. Velvet curtains hung from towering windows. A crystal chandelier glittered overhead. Every piece of furniture looked like it belonged in a royal palace. I sat upright, so quickly that my head spun. "What?" The words caught in my throat. My voice wasn't mine. It was deeper, sharper, older. I looked down at my hands. They were larger, pale, and marked with thin scars across the knuckles. "This isn't possible." A frightened maid dropped the silver tray she was carrying. Porcelain shattered across the marble floor. "Am I Lord Damien? Forgive me." "Damien?" My heartbeat stopped. "No." I stumbled toward the enormous mirror standing against the wall. The reflection stole the air from my lungs. Jet black hair, piercing crimson eyes, a handsome face that carried an intimidating coldness. There was no doubt. I was staring at Damien Blackwood, the villain, the most feared noble in my favorite fantasy novel. I took several unsteady steps backward. This has to be a dream, but everything felt painfully real. The cold marble beneath my feet, the smell of burning candles, the sound of my own breathing. Memory crashed into me like a tidal wave. Last night, I had been reading the final chapter of The Crown of Ashes, complaining online about how Damien's ending was completely deserved. He betrayed his allies, manipulated innocent people, burned villages simply to make a political statement. Eventually, the heroine, Elena Ashford, defeated him in the final battle after he had alienated everyone who had ever followed him. His last moments were miserable, alone, broken, hated, dead. And somehow, I had become him. The maid remained kneeling on the floor, trembling. "My lord." I slowly looked at her. "Stand up." She froze. "What?" I said stand. Instead of moving, she began shaking even harder. "I promise I'll clean everything. No punishment." The words slipped out before I could stop them. She stared at me in confusion. "My lord." I suddenly remembered. In the novel, Damien once had a servant whipped simply for breaking a teacup. The maid was waiting for the same cruelty. I took a slow breath. No one is being punished. She blinked. "I don't understand." "Neither do I." A knock interrupted us. The heavy doors opened. A tall man in polished silver armor entered the room. His sharp blue eyes immediately studied me. "My lord." I recognized him instantly. Lucas, Damien's personal knight. One of the few people who had remained loyal until the very end. In the novel, Damien eventually repaid that loyalty by sacrificing Lucas during a failed escape. I remembered hating that chapter. Lucas noticed the broken dishes. "I'll have someone replace them." I shook my head. "There's no need." The knight frowned. "My lord, it was an accident." Silence filled the room. Even the maid looked ready to faint. Lucas slowly crossed his arms. "Are you feeling unwell?" "Why would you ask that?" "Because in the 10 years I've served you." He looked directly into my eyes. "You've never forgiven an accident." His words sent a chill through me. Everyone in this palace expected a monster. I knew exactly why. Because Damien Blackwood had spent years giving them every reason to fear him. But I also knew something they didn't. If I kept acting like the original Damien, I already knew how my story would end. And I had absolutely no intention of dying the way the villain did. I looked around the room again, forcing myself to stay calm. Every detail matched the novel perfectly. The black and gold banners bearing the Blackwood family crest. The polished armor displayed along the walls. The massive fireplace carved with ancient dragons. There was no escaping the truth. I had awakened inside the world I had spent years reading about. Lucas remained silent, studying me with cautious eyes. "My lord." "Yes." "Should I summon the royal physician?" I almost laughed. "No. You seem different." I didn't sleep well. It was the safest excuse I could think of. He accepted the answer with a slight nod, though I could tell he wasn't convinced. Before either of us could speak again, another voice echoed from the doorway. "Well, this is unexpected." A young man wearing deep blue robes strolled into the room with a grin on his face. His messy blonde hair looked as though he had never bothered to comb it. A silver staff rested casually across his shoulder. "Felix, the palace's most talented mage." and the only person reckless enough to joke in front of Damian Blackwood. He looked from me to the frightened maid. No screaming, no threats, no broken bones. He raised an eyebrow. I must have entered the wrong room. Lucas sighed. My lord isn't himself today. Felix placed a dramatic hand over his heart. Has the world finally ended? I couldn't help smiling. I hope not. Both men froze. Felix blinked twice. You smiled. So, I've known you for 6 years. He pointed at me with his staff. That might be the first genuine smile I've ever seen. I quickly looked away. I had forgotten. The original Damien rarely smiled unless someone else was suffering. Changing too suddenly would attract attention. Still, pretending to be cruel wasn't an option. A servant hurried into the room. My lord, what is it? A messenger has arrived from the eastern border. Lucas accepted the sealed letter and handed it to me. The black wax carried the royal seal. I broke it open and began reading. As soon as I reached the second paragraph, my stomach tightened. I remembered this event. Exactly. A farming village had refused to pay increased taxes after a terrible harvest. In the novel, Damien responded by ordering the village burned to the ground as a warning to everyone else. Hundreds of innocent people lost their homes. It became one of the first major reasons the kingdom began calling him the Black Tyrant. Lucas waited patiently. What are your orders, my lord? I looked at the letter again. Then I looked out the palace window. This was it. The first major decision. The moment the original story truly began. If I repeated Damien's choice, the path toward my death would continue exactly as written. If I changed it, everything could become unpredictable. I folded the letter carefully. We're leaving immediately. Lucas nodded. I'll prepare the soldiers. No. He frowned. My lord, we're bringing food, medicine, and builders. Silence. Felix tilted his head. I definitely heard that wrong. You didn't. I met Lucas's eyes. The village isn't to be punished. It will be helped. The knight stood perfectly still. The servant nearly dropped the message bag. Felix slowly walked around me, as though inspecting an illusion spell. This is fascinating. What is? If you really are Damian Blackwood. He narrowed his eyes suspiciously. Then someone has clearly replaced your brain while you were sleeping. Ignoring his comment, I walked toward the door. Every step felt heavier than the last. I wasn't just making a different decision. I was challenging the fate of an entire story. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, the future waited. And for the first time since opening my eyes in this unfamiliar world, I allowed myself to believe that even a villain might deserve a second chance. The eastern village looked nothing like I remembered from the novel. In the original story, it had been reduced to ashes by Damian Blackwood's orders before the readers ever saw it. Now it still stood. Small wooden homes lined narrow dirt roads, and farmers worked quietly in nearby fields despite the poor harvest. Their expressions changed the moment our carriage appeared. Fear spread through the village like wildfire. They're here, Lord Blackwood. Take the children inside. I stepped down from the carriage and felt dozens of terrified eyes fixed on me. Lucas moved beside me. They believe you've come to carry out the punishment. I know. Behind us, soldiers began unloading crates from wagons. The villagers watched in confusion. One elderly man slowly approached, leaning heavily on a wooden cane. My lord, his voice trembled. If punishment is necessary. He lowered his head. Please spare the children. The word struck me harder than I expected. This wasn't fear created overnight. It was fear built through years of cruelty. I took a deep breath. No one will be punished. The old man blinked. What? I pointed toward the wagons. Those supplies are for your village. Silence. Food, medicine, blankets, building materials. The soldiers began carrying the crates into the village square. Mothers stared in disbelief. Children peeked from behind doors. No one moved. No one celebrated. They simply couldn't believe what they were seeing. Lucas stepped forward. You heard Lord Blackwood. The supplies belong to you. A little girl cautiously walked toward one of the boxes. Her mother immediately pulled her back. They're afraid it's a trick, Felix whispered beside me. I don't blame them. I walked to the nearest crate myself and opened it. Fresh bread filled the air with its warm scent. I picked up a loaf and handed it to the elderly man. It's yours. His hand shook as he accepted it. Tears filled his eyes. Thank you. The words spread through the crowd. One by one, the villagers slowly approached. Children smiled. Parents cried quietly. The fear that had greeted my arrival slowly gave way to cautious hope. As we prepared to leave, Lucas climbed onto his horse beside me. You've changed many lives today. I only corrected someone else's mistake. He looked at me thoughtfully. No, you made a choice. For the first time since awakening in this world, I noticed genuine respect in his eyes. Not fear, not obligation. Respect. The ride back toward the capital remained peaceful until Felix suddenly raised his hand. Wait. His expression lost its usual humor. Do you feel that? Lucas immediately drew his sword. I do. The ground began trembling beneath our horses. A loud roar echoed through the nearby forest. Birds burst into the sky. Soldiers tightened their formation. Felix's eyes widened. That's not normal. Before anyone could react, a terrified scream came from farther down the road. Help! Another followed. Monsters! Lucas turned toward me. My lord, I didn't hesitate. We're going. Lucas immediately raised his sword. Protect Lord Blackwood. I shook my head. Protect the civilians first. The soldiers hesitated for only a moment before obeying. We charged toward the screams. As we emerged from the forest, the scene before us froze me in place. A merchant caravan had been surrounded by enormous wolf-like monsters with glowing red eyes. Broken wagons lay scattered across the road, while frightened families huddled together behind overturned carts. Children cried. Horses struggled against broken harnesses. The creatures circled their prey with low, hungry growls. Felix tightened his grip on his staff. Shadow wolves. There are too many. Lucas stepped forward. We'll create an opening. I drew Damien's black sword from its jeweled scabbard. The weapon felt strangely familiar, as though the body's memories still remained. Let's move. The first wolf lunged. I stepped forward instinctively, swinging the blade across its path. Steel flashed. The beast collapsed before it reached the nearest child. Another attack from my left. Lucas intercepted it with his shield. My lord! Behind you! I spun and blocked a third monster just before it reached an elderly merchant. Felix raised his staff. Brilliant blue light exploded across the battlefield. A wall of fire forced several wolves backward. Don't let them reach the wagons. The soldiers quickly formed a defensive circle around the civilians. One frightened little boy remained frozen in the middle of the road. He couldn't have been older than 6. A massive shadow wolf noticed him. It charged. Time seemed to slow. The novel flashed through my mind. In the original story, Damien ignored innocent lives. Today, I refused. I ran. The wolf leaped. Without thinking, I threw myself between the monster and the child. Its claws tore across my shoulder. Pain exploded through my arm. I gritted my teeth and drove my sword forward. The beast let out one final howl before collapsing at my feet. The little boy stared at me with wide eyes. Thank you. I smiled despite the pain. Stay behind the soldiers. The remaining monsters hesitated. Then, as if realizing their attack had failed, they disappeared back into the forest. Silence settled over the road. The battle was over. Felix hurried toward me. You're bleeding. I've had worse. No, you haven't. Lucas examined my shoulder. The wound isn't fatal. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Pardon my words, my lord. But today, you fought like a true guardian. Before I could answer, I noticed someone standing beside the damaged carriage. A young woman with long silver blonde hair helped another injured traveler to their feet. Her emerald eyes slowly met mine. For a brief moment, neither of us spoke. I recognized her instantly. Elena Ashford, the heroine, the woman destined to kill Damien Blackwood. According to the novel, she should have looked at me with hatred. Instead, she studied me with quiet curiosity. As healers treated the wounded, I turned away, hoping to leave before fate pulled us together. Then I heard her soft voice behind me. Lord Blackwood. I stopped. Thank you for saving them. I looked back. She was smiling. Not with admiration, not with love, but with genuine gratitude. My heart sank. That wasn't supposed to happen. The story I knew had already begun to break. And somewhere deep inside, I realized the most dangerous enemy I would face might no longer be fate itself, but a future that no longer followed the pages I had once memorized. The journey back to the capital should have been simple. Instead, Elena somehow ended up riding beside me. Neither of us had suggested it. After the monster attack, the merchant caravan and our soldiers naturally merged into one larger group for safety. By pure coincidence, or perhaps fate, our horses kept falling into step beside each other. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, Elena broke the silence. Your shoulder. I glanced at the bandage wrapped beneath my cloak. It looks worse than it feels. She smiled faintly. That's exactly what someone with a painful injury would say. I laughed. I've been caught. She seemed surprised that I could laugh so easily. I expected you to be different. I've heard that a lot lately. She looked ahead at the road. The stories describe Lord Blackwood as someone who enjoys fear. And what do you think? She hesitated. I think the man I saw today risked his life to save strangers. I didn't answer. What could I say? That I wasn't really Damian Blackwood? That I already knew she was supposed to become my greatest enemy? Neither explanation would make any sense. The silence stretched comfortably between us until Felix guided his horse closer with a grin. Well, this is interesting. I sighed. What is? The famous Elena Ashford voluntarily talking to Lord Blackwood. He looked dramatically toward the sky. I never thought I'd witness such a miracle. Elena laughed softly. I was only thanking him. Felix smirked. For 20 minutes? She immediately looked away. I was being polite. Lucas rode up beside us before Felix could tease her further. My lord. Yes. A royal messenger. One of the soldiers handed me a sealed scroll bearing the king's crest. I opened it. The message was brief. Reports of strange disappearances have increased along the northern frontier. Lord Blackwood is ordered to investigate immediately. Elena Ashford is assigned to assist due to her experience fighting magical creatures. I read the final line twice. This wasn't supposed to happen. In the original novel, Damian and Elena never worked together. They spent most of the story trying to outmaneuver each other. Felix leaned over. Bad news? I folded the letter. We're changing direction. Lucas raised an eyebrow. The north. I nodded. We leave immediately. Elena looked surprised. I'm assigned as well. I know. For a brief moment, our eyes met again. She smiled politely. I'll do my best. I forced myself to return the smile. Let's hope that's enough. Inside, however, my thoughts raced. Every chapter of the novel had become less reliable. Every decision I've changed created another unexpected consequence. The future I once knew was disappearing. That realization frightened me more than any monster. By sunset, our small group had reached the first northern village. The streets were unusually quiet. Doors remained locked despite the early evening hour. An elderly innkeeper greeted us nervously. My lord, what happened here? He swallowed hard. People disappear after dark. Elena frowned. Has anyone seen the attackers? The old man slowly shook his head. No, they simply vanish. A cold breeze swept through the empty street. For reasons I couldn't explain, the village felt strangely familiar. Not because I had read about it, because something about the silence felt wrong. Very wrong. That evening, Lucas organized guards around the village while Felix began examining the strange magical traces left behind at the sites of the disappearances. I joined him outside an abandoned house. He knelt beside the ground, running his fingers over faint, glowing symbols. This magic isn't ordinary. What do you mean? Felix frowned. It doesn't belong to monsters. I felt a chill. Then whose is it? He stood slowly. Someone created this. The answer was worse than I expected. If humans were behind the disappearances, then the threat was far more dangerous than a wild beast. Behind us, Elena approached quietly. The villagers told me everyone who disappeared had received mysterious letters a few days beforehand. Letters? She nodded. They promised wealth and opportunity beyond the northern forest. Felix crossed his arms. A trap. It certainly sounds like one. Lucas joined us carrying another report. My lord, what is it? A royal courier arrived. He handed me another sealed document. I opened it. The letter came from Prince Adrian. Remain where you are. Reinforcements are being sent. Do not take independent action. I almost laughed. In the novel, Adrian rarely gave orders without another motive. He smiled in public. He manipulated people in private. I folded the letter. We'll wait until morning. Lucas nodded. As you wish. The next afternoon, we returned to the capital to present our initial findings before beginning a larger investigation. The royal court was already assembled. Nobles whispered as I entered. I caught fragments of their conversations. He's pretending. No one changes that quickly. It's another one of Blackwood's You fought like a true guardian. At the front of the chamber, before I could answer, Prince Adrian I noticed someone beside the throne with his usual charming smile. A young woman with long silver blonde hair. His voice sounded another injured his eyes did not. Feet. I hear you become quite the hero. Slowly met I'm simply doing my duty. For a brief moment, he chuckled softly. Neither of us spoke. I wonder how long I recognized her instant last. Elena Several nobles Ashford, nodded. The heroine. The woman elderly Lord Damien Blackwood. Your Highness according to the novel, correct. A man with Lord Blackwood's reputation instead cannot become she studied me overnight. With quiet curiosity. He's earning the people's trust for some hidden purpose. I turn away. The accusations hoping to leave before across the hall hold us together. I remained silent. Then I heard her soft arguing would only strengthen Lord Blackwood's suspicions. I stopped. Then, to my complete surprise, Elena stepped forward. She was smiling. That's enough. Not with admiration. Fell silent. Not with love. Every noble with genuine gratitude. She met their gazes without That wasn't supposed to happen. I fought beside the story I knew had already begun. I watched him risk his own life deep inside innocent people. I realized the most he had every opportunity to face might no longer be fate. A noble scoffed. But a future that no longer Elena followed the pages I had once memorized. I trust what I witnessed back to more than rumors repeated by people who weren't Instead, even Prince somehow ended up briefly surprised. Neither of us had suggested it. She was after the monster attack. Publicly, the merchant caravan the heroine and our soldiers naturally merged into one that evening. For safety, unable to sleep by pure coincidence through the palace gardens, perhaps fate. Soft voices our horses kept falling in a step beside each other. I recognized Elena for several minutes. Immediately, neither of us. She was speaking with her closest friend, Elena. Lady broke the silence. Sophia smiled knowingly. I glanced at the bandage wrapped beneath my cloak. Elena laughed worse than nervously. Have I? She smiled faintly. That's Sophia exactly what someone with a painful injury Does this have anything to do with Lord Blackwood? I've been caught. A long silence. She seemed surprised that Elena whispered so softly I almost expected you to be I don't understand. I've heard that a lot lately. What do you mean? She looked ahead at the road. I can't stop the stories describe Lord Blackwood. My heart nearly stopped. As someone who enjoys I know everyone says he's dangerous. And what do you think? But every time I remember him, I think the man I saw today, little boy, risked his life. She smiled to her strangers. I see someone completely different. What could I say? I quietly that I wasn't away really before they noticed me. That I already knew she was supposed to become my greatest enemy. There was no Neither explanation would make the original story hadn't. The silence stretched comfortably between us. It had completely fallen apart. Felix guided his horse closer. The heroine destined to end the villain's life had begun falling for the very man. What is she was meant to kill. The famous Elena Ashford voluntarily talking to Lord Blackwood. He looked dramatically toward the sky. I never thought I'd witness such a miracle. Elena laughed softly. I was only thanking him. Felix smirked. For 20 minutes? She immediately looked away. I was being polite. Lucas rode up beside us before Felix could tease her further. My lord. Yes. A royal messenger. One of the soldiers handed me a sealed scroll bearing the king's crest. I opened it. The message was brief. Reports of strange disappearances have increased along the northern frontier. Lord Blackwood is ordered to investigate immediately. Elena Ashford is assigned to assist due to her experience fighting magical creatures. I read the final line twice. This wasn't supposed to happen. In the original novel, Damien and Elena never worked together. They spent most of the story trying to outmaneuver each other. Felix leaned over. Bad news? I folded the letter. We're changing direction. Lucas raised an eyebrow. The north. I nodded. We leave immediately. Elena looked surprised. I'm assigned as well. I know. For a brief moment, our eyes met again. She smiled politely. I'll do my best. I forced myself to return the smile. Let's hope that's enough. Inside, however, my thoughts raced. Every chapter of the novel had become less reliable. Every decision I've changed created another unexpected consequence. The future I once knew was disappearing. That realization frightened me more than any monster. By sunset, our small group had reached the first northern village. The streets were unusually quiet. Doors remained locked despite the early evening hour. An elderly innkeeper greeted us nervously. "My lord, what happened here?" He swallowed hard. "People disappear after dark." Elena frowned. "Has anyone seen the attackers?" The old man slowly shook his head. "No, they simply vanish." A cold breeze swept through the empty street. For reasons I couldn't explain, the village felt strangely familiar. Not because I had read about it, because something about the silence felt wrong. Very wrong. That evening, Lucas organized guards around the village while Felix began examining the strange magical traces left behind at the sites of the disappearances. I joined him outside an abandoned house. He knelt beside the ground, running his fingers over faint, glowing symbols. "This magic isn't ordinary." "What do you mean?" Felix frowned. "It doesn't belong to monsters." I felt a chill. "Then whose is it?" He stood slowly. "Someone created this." The answer was worse than I expected. If humans were behind the disappearances, then the threat was far more dangerous than a wild beast. Behind us, Elena approached quietly. "The villagers told me everyone who disappeared had received mysterious letters a few days beforehand." "Letters?" She nodded. "They promised wealth and opportunity beyond the northern forest." Felix crossed his arms. "A trap. It certainly sounds like one." Lucas joined us carrying another report. "My lord, what is it?" A royal courier arrived. He handed me another sealed document. I opened it. The letter came from Prince Adrian. "Remain where you are. Reinforcements are being sent. Do not take independent action." I almost laughed. In the novel, Adrian rarely gave orders without another motive. He smiled in public. He manipulated people in private. I folded the letter. "We'll wait until morning." Lucas nodded. "As you wish." The next afternoon, we returned to the capital to present our initial findings before beginning a larger investigation. The royal court was already assembled. Nobles whispered as I entered. I caught fragments of their conversations. "He's pretending. No one changes that quickly." The palace gates closed behind me with a thunderous boom. Hundreds of soldiers lined the royal courtyard, their weapons already drawn. I slow my horse. "This doesn't look welcoming." Felix let out a dry laugh. "That's because it isn't." Lucas rested a hand on the hilt of his sword. "My lord, we're surrounded." I counted at least 3 companies of royal guards. Too many for a simple greeting. At the top of the palace steps, Prince Adrian stood dressed in brilliant white, smiling as though welcoming honored guests instead of preparing an arrest. "Lord Blackwood." His voice echoed across the courtyard. "Thank you for returning so promptly." I dismounted. "You summoned me." "I did." He descended the stairs slowly, never losing his pleasant smile. "The investigation into the northern disappearances has taken an unexpected turn. So I've noticed." He stopped only a few feet away. "I have as well." A royal captain stepped forward carrying several sealed documents. Adrian accepted them before turning toward the gathered nobles. "Citizens of the court." His voice grew louder. "It is with great regret that I announce new evidence has exposed the true architect behind the kingdom's recent tragedies." My stomach tightened. "No, not this." He raised one document into the air. "The evidence points to Lord Damian Blackwood." Gasps spread through the courtyard. Another noble stepped forward. I knew it. He was pretending all along. The accusations came faster than I could answer them. "He fooled us." "Monster." "Traitor." I looked toward Adrian. His expression remained perfectly calm. Only his eyes betrayed quiet satisfaction. He had planned this from the beginning. The captain unrolled another scroll. "Hidden warehouses containing forbidden magic. Secret correspondence with criminals. Payments to mercenaries." Every document carried my family's seal. Perfect forgeries. Lucas stepped beside me. "My lord, they're fabricated." "I know." Felix lowered his voice. "Unfortunately, no one else does." The crowd had already decided. They weren't judging the evidence. They were judging Damian Blackwood's past. A lifetime of cruelty had made Adrian's lies believable. He hadn't needed to create a convincing story. He only needed to remind everyone who I used to be. Adrian spread his arms dramatically. I wanted to believe Lord Blackwood had changed. He sighed. Instead, he manipulated us all. The royal guards raised their weapons. By order of the crown, the captain drew his sword. Damian Blackwood is under arrest for treason. Silence followed. Then a familiar voice shattered it. No! Every head turned. Elena stepped through the crowd without hesitation. She stopped beside me. I was there. She looked directly at Adrian. I fought beside Lord Blackwood. I watched him save innocent lives. He risked everything for people he didn't even know. Adrian smiled politely. Lady Ashford, a kind act does not erase years of evil. She met his gaze without flinching. Neither do lies create truth. The courtyard erupted into whispers. For the first time, uncertainty appeared on Adrian's face. It lasted only a second. Then he laughed softly. How unfortunate. He raised one hand. Arrest them both. Royal guards rushed toward us from every direction. Lucas stepped in front of me, his sword flashing from its sheath. If anyone wants Lord Blackwood, his voice rang across the courtyard. They'll have to go through me first. Felix slammed the end of his staff against the stone ground. A brilliant circle of blue light erupted beneath our feet. Everyone hold on. The spell exploded into a blinding wall of mist. Shouts echoed through the courtyard. They're escaping. Block the gates. Hidden by the magical fog, we sprinted through a narrow passage Lucas had discovered years earlier. By the time the mist faded, we were already beyond the capital's outer walls. We rode through the night without stopping. 3 days later, we reached an abandoned fortress deep within the northern mountains. There, Felix spread dozens of documents across a worn wooden table. I finally understand. Lucas looked up. What? The disappearances? The forged letters. The illegal magic. He tapped several pages. They all connect to Prince Adrian. Elena picked up another report. These payments came directly from the royal treasury, and these witnesses disappeared after refusing to obey him. Everything fit together. Adrian hadn't been protecting the kingdom. He had been creating its suffering to strengthen his own power. We need proof the court can't ignore, I said. Felix smiled. We already have it. 1 week later, we secretly returned to the capital during the annual royal assembly. Before Adrian could begin his speech, Lucas stepped into the center of the hall. Your Highness, you forgot something. Felix raised his staff. Illusion magic filled the chamber. Copies of Adrian's hidden orders appeared above every noble's head. Secret payments, forged documents, orders arranging the kidnappings, confessions from captured mercenaries. The hall fell completely silent. Adrian's smile finally disappeared. Impossible. You stole those records. I preserved them, I replied as I walked forward. You tried to bury the truth. The king slowly rose from his throne. Adrian. His voice shook with anger. Explain yourself. For the first time, the prince had no answer. Desperation replaced confidence. He drew his sword. If I cannot rule this kingdom. His eyes burned with fury. No one will. Dark magic exploded through the throne room. Before I could react, Adrian lunged toward me. Steel clashed. Then another blade intercepted his attack. Elena stood beside me. Her sword remained steady. She looked directly into Adrian's eyes. I once believed Damian Blackwood was destined to become this kingdom's greatest evil. She glanced at me and smiled. I was wrong. I trust the man he chose to become. Together, we forced Adrian backward. Lucas disarmed him with one powerful strike. Royal guards surrounded the fallen prince. This time, no one moved to protect him. The truth had finally won. Weeks later, news of Adrian's crime spread across every corner of the kingdom. The villages I had helped welcomed me with smiles instead of fear. Families once terrified by the Blackwood name thanked me openly. The road to forgiveness was still long, but it had finally begun. One peaceful morning, Elena and I stood together on a hill overlooking the capital. The rising sun painted the kingdom in shades of gold. She slipped her hand into mine. You changed everything. I smiled. No, I only changed myself. She laughed softly. And that changed everything else. Looking across the kingdom, I finally understood the lesson this strange new life had taught me. I had awakened inside a story as its villain. Everyone expected me to follow the ending already written, but fate had never been carved into stone. Every choice created another path. Every act of kindness rewrote another page. The original author had written Damian Blackwood as a monster who died alone. Instead, by choosing compassion over cruelty, trust over fear, and hope over hatred, I earned something the story had never imagined. Not merely survival, a future built by my own choices. And as the sun rose higher above the kingdom, I stepped forward beside Elena, knowing the greatest ending was never the one I had read. It was the one we had written together,